Lupus LA would like to thank our generous sponsors for their support of the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. We thank GSK for their focus on autoimmune disease and their continued support of Lupus LA. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, and as always at the top of the show, I want to thank GSK, our incredible sponsor, for allowing us to tell amazing lupus stories. And I am so excited to have our guest today. Our guest is known to many of you. Her name is Linda Park. She's an actress and a producer and star of Bosch and hit shows like Star Trek Enterprise, The Affair. One of my personal favorites of your work is For All Mankind. Love that show. And so we are really excited to have you here and to tell your lupus story. Welcome to the show, Linda.
Thanks, Adam. I'm super excited to be here. I'm a little nervous. I haven't talked about lupus in a while, but I think this is a really great opportunity.
Yeah, no, and you and I have crossed paths a little bit over the years, and I feel like this is a great opportunity and a great format to talk to you in. I think we're going to talk later. I know you're working on a short film that's really focused on lupus, which I think is a terrific project. But we'll get to that later. I want to start by hearing your story, by hearing what I always ask my guests is kind of what was life like before the lupus diagnosis? Because I think the lupus diagnosis always alters a person's life in such a way. And I think that's a really interesting place to start.
Yeah, I mean, I was so young. I was diagnosed with lupus for my high school physical going into college. So I was 17. And when I look back, I see the signs. But when you're young, you know, you could break your leg and just like, I'm fine. I'm going to keep going. You don't like mortality feels so far away that these symptoms that I recognize now as lupus, like I was very, very involved in theater and I would be in school, but then also working at a professional theater, understudying or being in rehearsal in a small role. So I was very busy, like going to dance class, being in school, being in rehearsal. And I thought that was the reason that I would need to sleep all the time. I remember during lunch, I would have to go into my car and crawl into my car and sleep because the exhaustion was, I literally could not keep my eyes open. And when I think back to having to pull over in the middle of the highway driving home to sleep in like a divider because I thought I'm going to crash, at the time I didn't question it. I just thought I'm tired. I'm doing a lot of stuff. So my life before, you know, lupus is such a complicated thing for me to explain to people because it's not just the symptoms. It's also, for me, I really believe the emotional aspect of what is stress. Stress is not just physical stress, emotional stress, all of these things that our bodies perceive as stress. Sometimes the body's not able to differentiate between a toxic overload and a violent home situation. They both impact the body as stress. So your question, I think my life before, it's so hard because I was so young when it happened to me.
I was the exact same age. I was 16 and I was also in theater and you do the theater world, even in high school is these long, crazy hours and, you know, everyone's having fun until 3 days before a show and then you're panicked and everybody, you know, and so I do think you're right. I think the stress levels in your body just go kind of haywire and that's either triggers the lupus or sets off a flare or aggravates you in such a way. And then I think your body sort of mirrors that stress.
Yeah, like I don't think the theater or the dance classes, I don't think that was my cause of stress. I think that was the reason that I thought I was so tired, but I recognize now that that was my first symptom that something was wrong, was the amount of fatigue that I felt in retrospect, looking back as an adult and remembering that was not normal, that's not normal what I was feeling. The joint pain that I was having, I thought it's just because I dance so much. And I look back and I see that was not normal. In terms of the stress, I can look back at the um, instances of trauma and stress as a young girl, other things, theater brought me happiness. That was, I feel, the way that I survived. But I look back and I really do think that those very difficult emotional, like physical traumas, that had to be repressed because I didn't have a voice. I wasn't allowed to speak up or fight against. And autoimmune is literally your body attacking itself. And I believe, from my own personal experience, that, and this is a little bit woo-woo, but that my all that I wasn't able to express externally went inwards. And that's kind of a stress. It's every unexpressed, like, no, grief, ability to say, like, this is not okay. As a child, you don't have that kind of agency, sadly. And so all of that gets turned inwards. And the fact that lupus, when I did the research, was largely affected minorities and women, which are two demographics that are highly repressed, that are highly suppressed within being able to express their anger or their sadness and say, no, this is not okay. And the world is changing, yes, but I just think that that's so interesting.
I think that's fair. I think that makes a lot of sense. You were you diagnosed fairly quickly because obviously getting diagnosed at such a young age, my experience is either having horribly acute symptoms that end up hospitalizing you, and that's how a doctor figures it out, or you get really lucky and you get a smart doctor who kind of, has a little bit more, let me take a deeper dive and not just use that, oh, well, you dance and you do theater, so that's why you're tired. And, how were you seen?
I was pretty severe right away. My kidneys were spilling massive amounts of protein and my blood platelets were dangerously low. So it wasn't one of those things where I went to the doctor because I was like, oh, I'm so tired. My joints hurt. I have like a little bit of a rash. And at this time, not a lot was known about lupus. My entire summer before I went to drama school was spent in the hospital, having various tests, biopsies. Do I have multiple sclerosis? Like, my blood drawn multiple times a week just to check, to keep on top of my blood platelet levels specifically. And at the time, I think the scariest thing is the not knowing, is what is it that's making my organs dysfunction. And it's like, I read a lot of books about women who get, whether cancer or kind of some illness when they're younger, and it really is a life interrupted, because when you're so young, it's suddenly something that you wouldn't even think of or conceive of to be possible, which is your own mortality. When that's thrown there and you're not able to do this, that, or the other thing, there's a lot of like the why me, why this, why, like why. And for me, when they finally diagnosed me with lupus nephritis at the end of the summer, I did have some relief. At the time they wanted me to, I think, be part of a test group using chemotherapy. Like it was, and I said no. And my mom said no, because I didn't want to be a test, like, even if it's free, I don't want free chemo. So they put me on prednisone, which is like quite normal for lupus. And so my first year of drama school, where they're breaking you down and they're breaking, and the kind of drama school I went to is old school, where it's like we're going to rip you of every sense of identity and every crutch you ever had around acting and just like break you down and build you back up. And nobody knows that I'm on massive amounts of prednisone. And I'm so exhausted from the kidney spilling, the lupus. It was so difficult to, and I didn't want anyone to know me, and I didn't want them to treat me differently. And I think the hardest thing was like there would be parties people would go to, and I would go because I'm like, I'm in college, but I would spend the entire party sleeping on the sofa. Or they would always say, Linda's like a cat, she'll sleep anywhere. And I would be curled up on a bench outside of rehearsal or like behind the trash can sleeping between voice and movement. Um, and then there was the fact that I had to get my blood drawn regularly. And people thought that I was a drug addict because I would get bruises because my blood platelets were so low and I was taking so much blood that I had like track marks where they had to start taking from in between my fingers and in between my toes.
So when did you first tell somebody that you had lupus in that world?
I think I told my best friend about lupus, Kim Dawson. I told her it was kind of, I think, towards the end of freshman year. I was getting really sick at the end of freshman year. Every time they tried to scale back my prednisone, because I was at very high levels, my blood platelets went down lower than even before I started the prednisone. So my blood platelets were getting so low that even on the prednisone, I was a risk for internal hemorrhaging. They were more worried about if I were to fall downstairs, get into a car accident, about like the blood not being able to clot, like in my brain. And then again, you know, I was in movement class and I'm doing stage combat and I get lightly hit and I have a huge bruise. So it's like just freshman year, I was covered in bruises, covered in what looked like track marks. And I think at the end of that, they wanted me to come home from school early, just because how low my blood platelets, and talk about next steps, whether it would be removing my kidney or removing my spleen. I started to have very weird symptoms. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but sometimes on my face, and this is how one of my friends, I told him, because he said, your face is bleeding. I would have certain pores that would just start bleeding. Like, well, it would just be one drop of blood, but it would come from my pores, just from like having such low blood platelets.
Ugh, that's dangerous.
It's really, it's frightening. It's very, very frightening. And you say, was I one of the lucky ones that, you know, where it kind of started like vague? I think I'm lucky that it started at the time I was diagnosed with it because there was such little knowledge. I think I was lucky to have something big happen. So there wasn't years of people telling me, oh, you're fine. It's just that, and then developing this complex, which, I ended up developing later anyways, just around just kind of more of a hypochondriacal thing from having this and thinking, oh my God, am I having a flare? Like I feel this, what is this? Suddenly where
you become very in tune with your body, and then every little nuance. I mean, I still have that where I can it's like a systems check. And if a little red light's flashing anywhere in your body, you have to explore it. You can't just ignore it.
I have to check my ANA. I have to check my bilirubin. I have to check it caused me to become hyper vigilant to a point where it was actually causing, I believe, like emotional stress and damage to me. And I think I found the middle ground. So, before lupus, it was like no hypervigilance, no sense of mortality. And then after the diagnosis and going through various forms of flares over the years, where I had a specifically very bad flare when I turned 30, and that set me off on like being a crazy hypochondriac about what I eat, where I feared I feared a lot of food. I was starting having these crazy allergic reactions to all kinds of things that I'd never been allergic to before. And when you work on camera, I don't have the luxury of breaking out in hives or turning beet red. And so it was always this fear of, what am I going to eat? Is it going to impact me being in front of the camera? And just causing this feeling of just panic. But going back to what we were talking about before, I think having more of my major organs, like my spleen, my kidney, and then a couple months of testing, having had the, I still remember his name, Dr. Feiner from Kaiser, having him give me the diagnosis of lupus, I think that was actually the better path for me rather than being the slow thing.
Well, because you're going to get the treatment faster and you're going to get people to really pay attention and focus. And it sounds like, that was really helpful. I think, was your family supportive in the sense that, were you able to, because it's tough, I think, when you go to you're going to a new school, you're purposely not telling anybody, but what's your outlet? How do you let that support in?
By getting emotional, I had no outlet. I had no, I guess my my was acting. It's always been acting. I talk about the kind of very, and I don't use trauma lightly. It's thrown around a lot nowadays. I use it very seriously. And, I do believe a lot of that impacted whatever genetic disposition I had to lupus to form this aberration, with my ANA and all of that, and my spleen and my kidneys doing what they needed to do or thought they needed to do. But acting was my escape then. And then once I got diagnosed and I was in school that first year, acting has always saved my life. It was where I couldn't express. It was the one place I felt safe to express. So I didn't have a person as an outlet. I had, I had acting as my outlet. And my family, it's hard. It's hard because it's hard for a parent not to overreact. But I think something that I always try to remember, if somebody around me gets ill, somebody else's illness is not my grief to take on, meaning for me to go, oh my God, why they don't need more histrionic, well, I can't believe this is, there's something I know that was just natural in my mother to freak out about it and be so, but when you're sick, that's not what you need. You don't need someone crying in front of you as you're leaving the hospital, having your spleen taken out, because then I'm the one that has my spleen taken out and everything hurts. And then I feel like I need to take care of this, my mother who's sobbing, and it's too much. It's too much. And I don't think it's her fault. I think it's a natural reaction. But yeah.
I want to take a quick break, and then I want to come back and talk about when you started working professionally and the world that we live in, or that we lived in back then, in terms of, I guess it's about keeping secrets again, right? So, all right, we're going to be right back with more from Linda Parker.
Please visit our online store at lupusla.org. By purchasing Lupus LA products, you are directly supporting lupus patients and their families. For more information, visit lupusla.org.
We are back on the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight, talking to Linda Park. And before the break, we were talking about when you were in school. And then, so tell me a little bit about kind of how your professional career got started and sort of the big break moments and whether or not lupus played a part and how you managed that.
Like I said, I went to drama school, and we have the luxury of having something called a showcase where we go to New York and LA. And by the time I graduated, my class was only 15 people. So we go and we perform for agents and managers. And I immediately booked an agent in New York and then an agent in LA. And when we were all out in LA, I had to stay longer because I got called back for various auditions that they sent me out on. And then I had a test for a pilot. So I was like, oh, this is a good sign. Maybe I'm doing the right job.
For all those people who want to be actors out there, I can tell you from personal experience, Linda's experience is definitely not the norm. So yeah, that's fantastic.
That's back to Boston, and I stay in LA. And I have a funny story. There's nothing to do with lupus, but I love the story. And he's still my agent now. When I had to stay longer and I had nowhere to stay in LA, he had another client that had space in his apartment. And so he got me a room in an apartment with, do you know Kelvin Yu, actor?
I know the name. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's a writer. He's a very good writer. As an actor, he was on Dying for Sex recently. And as a writer, he wrote an incredible show on Disney, and he created and wrote it. So Steven said, okay, you can stay at Kelvin's place. But when we went over there, my agent, Steven, brought a bag of cleaning supplies because it was a house of guy surfers.
Okay.
So my wonderful agent cleaned this boy's bathroom for me because I would be sleeping
That's
there.
Great.
And then Kelvin had just gotten a root canal. And so his cheeks were puffed up and he couldn't speak. But he drove me to all my auditions.
Wow.
He couldn't speak to me because he had a root canal or his wisdom teeth taken out. And I would come out of my callbacks or my auditions, and Kelvin would be like sleeping in a chair because he was on painkillers. And so to this day, he's a very good friend of mine, and he's got an amazing, wonderful career. And he was my first friend, of course, when I moved to LA. He was my first friend in Los Angeles.
That's awesome. I came to LA as an actor in the late 90s, and I have a lot of those like crazy stories of how you met people, and it's such a wild business.
So then once I moved to LA, I got my first job 2 weeks after I was in LA on Jurassic Park. And then a couple months later, my first couple months in LA, I got Star Trek. And I would say in terms of having to keep secrets, I did have to say that I had lupus. And at that point, insurance calls you, SAG calls you, the business affairs calls you. At that point, it's like, what insurance do we need to cover you? It was just a lot of fear that I didn't realize I'm an insurance risk,
Yeah.
And I had to say, this is my recent blood work. I'm totally good. I'm healthy. I'm not in an active flare. I had to prove my current health. I have one of my best friends. I don't want to mention who it is just for privacy. She has lupus, and she's really struggled with this fear of it affecting her livelihood, where for many, many jobs, she did not tell anybody that she had lupus, and she had to go through some major surgery. But recently that it's kind of more out there now, but leading up to it, she spent years and years working on a set, hiding this. And I can say, I know, like I was saying about my college experience, it's so lonely to have to, we're already, I feel a lot of us who get lupus have dealt with some kind of repression of our own emotions. And then we get lupus, and then we feel like we have to hide our lupus for fear of maybe somebody not hiring us because of it. I no longer feel that way, but I also, since I had my spleen out, I have been largely in remission. I feel like I'm one of the healthiest people that I know. Um, I still struggle with flares. I had a flare 3 years ago where I got severe liver damage, but like you said, we're kind of hyper vigilant negatively, but positively, that we know our bodies and we know, okay, something's wrong. You get the blood work, you pull all your people because you collect these people after a while. And so what do we need to do? And I was able to get back on track in a couple of months. And my liver levels are normal, my AST, my ALT, my bilirubin, everything normalized. But I think the positive thing of me having lupus is I have such a very clear communication channel with my body, that my body tells me, hey, we're not happy with these ways that you're treating yourself, either working too hard or, eating this kind of food, or, going out too much, or being in a stressful relationship or dynamic, whether it be work or personal, that my body tells me with a flare, we're not aligned right now. But then when I respond in kind, my body clicks right back into place. Like, we have a very, very clear communication channel. And it serves me as an actor so much to know my body and my system, because I am an instrument to the text, the story, to the character. And I really feel like every actor, if they don't know themselves somatically, they're not using their full instrument. They're not using their full self. It's not just in here and in here. It's in every, cell of your whole system. Yeah, did that answer? I was rambling, but I feel like maybe that answered it. Like how I got to my career start in LA and how lupus affected that.
No, I mean, what's interesting about the acting world is every time you do a job, you're getting multiple jobs in a year, in a few year period. So every time you kind of have to start over, and with things like the insurance and the, all of that. And I think it can be a very up and down business. And it sort of mirrors lupus in a way, because you don't know what's around the corner. And I wonder if, that sort of mirroring has kind of helped you explain to yourself kind of your lupus and your path in life, and navigating the challenges of kind of the up and down nature of the movie business, the TV business, and the disease, because they don't always match up.
First of all, being an actor and also dealing with what I believe is a pretty serious autoimmune disease, is that it makes me have a very strong grasp on the fundamental reality of life, which is nothing is guaranteed, that there is a lot of uncertainty. If there's one thing that we can be sure of in this world, and only one thing, is that everything changes. If you don't like how you're feeling now, just wait that'll change. Whether you like it, it's a good feeling, or that it's a bad feeling, indiscriminately, good or bad, it'll change. And it's not only just like the acting career going up and down, but for me, I may have to suddenly change all my plans because, okay, now I'm moving to Atlanta for 3 months. And now we got to reorganize, how are we going to, and I've done this my entire adult life I've been doing this professionally since high school in professional theater. I consider professionals, when did you start getting paid? So when did the world start saying acting is a service that we will compensate you with cash? You can say that that's not perfect. For me, that is what a professional actor is. It's a reciprocity with the universe. The universe is saying, yes, this is, yeah. And then it's like money, it's blood flow. And for me, it's something where like I've always lived this way of not knowing. And I got lupus very close to when I started working professionally. And the similarity between lupus and acting is that this awareness of the shifting tectonic plates of life, like anything can happen at any moment. Like I have to be ready to like, don't get, and it can be hard personally, you know, it can be hard, especially with people who may need more of a sense of like stability or knowing. I think my son understands pretty well. I went back to work when he was at 3 months. And I've taken him when he was younger as much as I could on location with me. And I try to inculcate in him this understanding that like we got to be ready at any moment, like, you know, but as long as we have each other and we know we like the important things are in place, as long as I know that like, you're my number one, I love you so much. We can figure out any kind of move we can figure out. And, you know, my son's dad was great with that. He was like, okay, you got this job. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And that's the way I think it should be ultimately, you know, I don't know.
Well, tell me about the short film that you're working on. Tell me how it came to you. You know, you wrote it. It's very personal. I'll just let you sort of tell me about it.
Yeah. So I started writing during the pandemic, and my first script was historical drama. It got placed at Sundance, at Austin Film Festival, Golden Script, you know, semifinalist, finalist. And so I've written a few projects before this, but this is the first one that was very loosely memoir, semi-autobiographical, and I want to say very, very, very loosely in terms of the emotional inner life and journey. And this woman has lupus. So 3 years ago, when I told you I had that flare and I had the severe liver damage and developed Epstein-Barr virus on top of lupus and Sjogren's syndrome, which is quite common if you have lupus to start developing these other ancillary autoimmune diseases. What was dangerous was what was happening to my body from the liver damage. It was pretty much like at a level of cirrhosis. And at that time, things were not well for me personally. And shortly after that diagnosis, my son's dad and I decided to separate. And it was the right thing to do. My health got on track shortly thereafter. But there was a lot of grief, like an end of a marriage and having another flare and kind of coming face to face with everything. I needed a way to express myself. And so I started writing this story. And initially I wrote it about cancer, because somebody very close to me was dealing with cancer at that time. And I had this fear of it being about lupus. And I've come around, but I had this fear that like, if I write about so closely to my own experience, now that I'm in remission, I'm healthy again, am I tempting the fates, reliving this, like writing so much about exactly what happened to me? And I came around after Dying for Sex came out. My director, she was like, this is way too close. This is way too close. Like the cancer, you know, it's really about how a life-altering illness makes a woman reassess the way that she's lived her life and what does it mean to truly live, which there's nothing like your mortality being tested for me that made me really, really deep dive into the question of what does truly living mean and what does living a meaningful life mean? And that's been a journey for me for a while that has really become very much in the forefront after the severe liver damage. And so there are obviously a lot of similarities between that and Dying for Sex, especially because this character I wrote goes kind of on this pilgrimage of seeking pleasure because she's someone who's denied herself and almost been self-flagellating, being a ballet dancer, being controlling of her body, seeing her body as some kind of object. And it's this coming back to herself, coming back to what is it to truly love her body. But she goes on this very, very extreme journey. I won't give away everything, but it is very, I mean, there's a lot of racy things. It also questions the construct of modern day marriage and relationships and what is, what do we accept as societal constructs around relationship and marriage and what is actually true for us? Not that I have the answer. These are questions that I was asking myself. And I often will approach a role or a new script because I have something in my life that I'm questioning and I'm not sure of. And I can use the character in the process to do a deep dive into that question. I mean, I don't think there are pat answers to anything. So I don't assume that like my short answers any questions, but I hopefully it makes people ask questions of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great script, and I know we're going to sort of have work with Lupus LA to really try to promote it out there and be a part of the story because I think it's very powerful. It does ask a lot of questions, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think one of the things we try to do on this podcast is share everybody's story in their own way, so that they can ask themselves certain questions and reflect. And I think it's a piece that I think when it's done and it's shot, it's going to have a beautiful tone and story to it, but it is going to help people reflect on their own illness, whether that's lupus or cancer or any illness they might be dealing with. So, I really applaud you for that.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, it's relatable for anyone, even if they're, dealing with severe depression or whatever is keeping you from living your life. But for me, though initially I had fear about that I'm maybe, tempting the fates, like I said, I feel so excited now at this point, not only to tell the story, to bring more awareness to lupus, which there's not a lot of awareness. When I tell people about lupus, they go, oh yeah, like I've heard of it. And then they have no idea how much it can actually impact your life. But on top of that, I really want to take this as an opportunity for myself to heal around hiding for so long. Like I said, my first year of drama school, I kept it to myself. I was embarrassed that I had this, at the time, I thought like something that made me less than, at work where I had to hide it because in fear of being rejected, being seen as like something's wrong with me. I'm broken. And I really, really over these years in this healing journey, with lupus and just with my entire past is to say, no, these things that were incredibly difficult that I had so much shame around, whether it's like the trauma or my lupus, these things, good or bad, I don't look at them that way. They happened. It's fact, but they have built me into the artist that I am. They've made me so much more empathic and compassionate They've made me ask the deeper questions about life that I may not have asked if I had not lived in such extreme circumstances. That it drew me to my spiritual path of Buddhism. Everything that I hold dear and value in my own heart and mind and in my life comes from these struggles, comes from being sick with lupus and what I believe led me to be sick in the first place. So telling the story and sharing lupus with the world is also a way for me to have kind of a coming out party and say, there is nothing wrong with me. I am a success story, and hopefully my success story, and how not only I'm in remission and I'm very healthy. I like dance almost every day. Lupus got me on a health and wellness journey at the age of 17, doing what everybody else in LA is doing now. I've been doing that since I was 17, and that's why I still look so young. It's like, so I'm going to be a poster child of a lupus success story. And I would love, and my friend who I told you, she's one of my best friends, is, she had been following me because my story was an example for her. I did an article in Good Housekeeping about lupus. And that was the last time that I had done an interview, about lupus. And to know that gave her so much strength to be like, there's another girl with lupus who's successfully acting and thriving in Los Angeles. I would love for all the people who have lupus, especially women, to watch this short and not only to feel seen, but to feel like this can make them stronger and fuller and richer versions of themselves, not less than, but more than they were before.
I think that's beautiful. I'm so appreciative that you've told your story here and that we're going to see it in the art form as a short. We're actually going to tell our audience, you'll see some links at the bottom here, how they can get involved with the film and be a real part of not only telling your story, but helping to be in the process and watch it grow and watch it take off. And I'm so excited about that. So Linda, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And we're going to have you back after the movie. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, that'd be so fun.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Linda.
Thank you.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.